The door closed softly behind him. And then, silence. The kind of silence that presses against your ears, that makes every breath you take feel too loud, too heavy. I sat there on the sofa, staring at the empty doorway where Mark had stood just moments ago. My hands rested limply in my lap, but my entire body felt rigid, locked in place, as if moving might shatter the fragile reality I'd just stepped into. The weight of his words, "I see you. I think about you. I wonder what it would be like if you were mine." The words echoed in my mind, looping endlessly, carving themselves into me. How could he have said that? How could he have dared? But more terrifying, how could those words feel? Like something I'd been starving to hear. My chest rose and fell in uneven breaths. I pressed a trembling hand to my lips, as if to stop them from speaking aloud the thoughts swirling inside me. Thoughts I didn't want to face. The marriage I tried to protect upstairs, Daniel was asleep, safe, oblivious, trusting if he knew what had just happened in our living room. He would never forgive either of us. And yet, hadn't he left me here? Left me alone with Mark without a second thought? Hadn't he grown distant in ways I never wanted to admit? The late nights at work, the conversations cut short, the way his eyes glazed over when I spoke sometimes, as though his mind were elsewhere. I told myself it was normal, that marriages settle, that passion fades, that comfort was enough. But then Mark spoke those forbidden words. Words Daniel hadn't spoken to me in years. And suddenly, comfort felt like a cage. Frozen in conflict, I couldn't move. My legs wouldn't carry me upstairs. My lips couldn't form words. I just sat there, frozen in the storm of my own emotions. Guilt clawed at me. Guilt for even letting his words linger. Guilt for not pushing him out sooner. Guilt for the part of me that wanted to cling to what he'd said. But beneath the guilt was something else. Something dangerous. A spark. That spark terrified me more than anything. Because once a spark is lit, it can spread. It can burn. The night that wouldn't end, I don't know how long I sat there. Minutes. Hours. The clock ticked on, but time felt meaningless. At some point, I rose slowly and went to the window. The street outside was quiet, the night calm, as if nothing had happened. But my reflection in the glass betrayed me. My eyes were wide, restless, alive in a way I hadn't seen in years. I barely recognized the woman staring back at me. Finally, I forced myself upstairs. I slipped into bed beside Daniel, careful not to wake him. His steady breathing filled the room, a sharp contrast to the chaos inside me. I lay there with my eyes open, staring into the dark, his words replaying over and over again until dawn. Morning after, when the sunlight filtered through the curtains, nothing felt the same. I moved through the motions of making breakfast, of smiling when Daniel finally came down the stairs, of listening to his casual chatter about work. But everything inside me was fractured. Every word Daniel spoke reminded me of the words he didn't say. Words Mark had dared to give me. Words that left me frozen between the life I had and the feelings I feared. Mark hadn't just stayed late. After dinner, he had left behind a truth I couldn't ignore anymore. The lasting shock. Days later, I was still haunted. Every time my phone buzzed, I wondered if it was him. Every time Daniel kissed me goodbye, I wondered if he knew something had shifted. And every night, when the house grew quiet again, I replayed that moment on the sofa. His eyes, his voice, his confession. I told myself I was strong enough to forget. But the truth, his words had taken root. They lived in me now, whether I wanted them to or not. And that was what truly left me frozen. Because deep down, I knew nothing would ever be the same again. The night had gone on far longer than it should have. The plates were washed, the table was clear, the wine bottle nearly empty. Daniel had long since gone to bed, leaving me alone with Mark. And still, he lingered. I sat on the sofa, arms folded loosely, trying to hide my unease. Mark sat opposite me, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees, watching me in a way that made the air between us feel charged. I couldn't decide if I should politely tell him it was getting late, or if a part of me didn't want him to go just yet. The shift in his voice, he broke the silence first. You know, he said quietly, almost as if confessing something. I wasn't planning to stay this late. I laughed softly, nervous. Then why did you? He hesitated, his eyes holding mine. Because I didn't want to leave. Not yet. Something in the way he said it made my heart stumble in my chest. His tone was no longer the casual friendliness of dinner conversation. It was deeper, more deliberate. Mark, I began, but he leaned back, shaking his head slightly, as if debating whether to continue. And then he did. The first confession. I've been wanting to tell you something for a long time, he said. His voice was steady, but his hands flexed as though betraying the nerves he kept hidden. I swallowed. Tell me what? He exhaled slowly, as if letting go of a weight he'd been carrying for years. That I see you, really see you, and I don't think Daniel does. The words hit me like ice water. I froze. My lips parted, but no sound came. Out. What? I finally whispered. You heard me, he said, leaning forward again, his eyes never leaving mine. I've watched the two of you for years. I know he loves you in his own way, but he doesn't notice you the way he should. He doesn't look at you the way I do. My pulse thundered in my ears. I wanted to protest, to shut it down immediately, but his words had already slipped under my skin. The tension that grew. You shouldn't say that, I said weakly. Maybe I shouldn't, Mark replied softly. But I can't keep pretending anymore. I came here tonight thinking I'd enjoy a good meal, some laughter, and then I saw you. The way you move, the way you smile when you're not forcing it, and I realized how much I've been holding back. I shifted uncomfortably, but I couldn't break away from his gaze. His eyes were steady, burning with something I didn't want to name. Mark, this isn't right, I whispered. He nodded slowly. I know, but tell me honestly, haven't you ever felt it too? That emptiness in your marriage? That ache you try to ignore? The words struck deeper than I wanted to admit, because there was truth in them. Truth I kept hidden, even from myself. The words that froze me. And then, he said the words that would stay with me forever. I think about you, more than I should, and I can't stop wondering what it would be like if you were mine. Time seemed to stop. I sat frozen, my breath caught in my throat. My body went cold, yet my heart raced with a heat I couldn't control. No one had ever spoken to me like that, not even Daniel, not in years. Those words were dangerous, forbidden, and yet they unlocked something inside me I thought had been long buried. I should have told him to leave. I should have stood up, walked him to the door, and ended the night right there. But I couldn't move. The battle inside me. He leaned closer, his voice barely above a whisper. Say something. Anything. But what could I say? That I was shocked. That I was angry. That I was terrified of how much a part of me wanted to hear those words, needed to hear them. Instead, I just stared at him, my silence speaking louder than anything I could have said. His hand twitched, as if he wanted to reach for mine, but he stopped himself. I'm not asking for anything, he said quietly. I just needed you to know, because pretending was starting to eat me alive. The honesty in his voice was devastating. I wanted to scream, to tell him he had no right to say these things. And yet, Another part of me, the part that had grown quietly lonely over the years, was aching, trembling, alive in a way it hadn't been in so long. The unforgettable moment finally, I found my voice, though it trembled when I spoke. "Mark, you should go." He nodded slowly, as though he expected that. But he didn't look away. His eyes lingered on mine, searching, memorizing. "All right," he said softly. "I'll go. But you'll remember this, even if you never admit it. You'll remember that someone saw you tonight." And with that, he stood, collected his coat, and walked to the door. I sat frozen on the sofa, my body rigid, my mind racing. His words echoed in the silence he left behind. "I see you. I think about you. I wonder what it would be like if you were mine." I didn't move for what felt like hours, because I knew, deep down, he was right. And that realization left me frozen. The evening had started so simply, so normally, that I never could have guessed how it would end. It was a Friday night, and our home smelled of rosemary chicken, garlic bread, and the faint sweetness of red wine. I'd spent hours preparing, the dinner more out of habit than necessity. My husband, Daniel, had invited his old college friend, Mark, over. They hadn't seen each other in a while, and I thought it would be nice, even refreshing, to host someone from outside our usual circle. I didn't expect the night to stretch into something I'd remember far too clearly. The warm beginning, the three of us sat around the dining table, laughter echoing between bites. Daniel and Mark reminisced about their college days, throwing around names I didn't recognize, telling stories that made them laugh so hard their eyes watered. I smiled, refilled glasses, and leaned back in my chair, content to listen. Mark was easy to like. His presence was warm, confident, and strangely grounding. He carried himself with that casual charm of a man who never quite lost the best of his youth, yet had matured enough to know when to listen. I noticed it in the way he paid attention when I spoke, in the way his eyes softened whenever he laughed. Still, I never thought much of it. He was my husband's friend, after all. Dinner stretched on. Plates were emptied. The wine flowed, and soon the house felt cocooned in a bubble of warmth and easy companionship. But that bubble didn't last. When the evening should have ended by 10:30. I expected the evening to wind down. Usually, Daniel would yawn, thank me for the meal, and Mark would prepare to leave. But this night felt different. Daniel leaned back in his chair, clearly relaxed from the wine. "You two keep talking," he said with a chuckle, already standing up. "I'm heading to bed early. Mark, you know your way out." I blinked. That was unusual. Daniel rarely left me alone with guests, especially close friends. But I brushed it off. Mark smiled, lifted his glass in a small salute, and said, "Good night, man. I'll head out soon." I thought soon meant a few minutes. But minutes became half an hour, then an hour. And still he stayed. The silence between words, the living room was quiet, apart from the low hum of the heater. I gathered dishes, into the kitchen, rinsing plates under warm water, trying to fill the silence with something ordinary. But when I turned around, Mark was there, leaning casually against the doorway. Watching me. His expression wasn't strange, not exactly, but there was a steadiness in his gaze that unsettled me. "You really outdid yourself with dinner," he said softly. His voice was lower than it had been all evening, carrying a weight it hadn't before. I forced a smile. "Thank you. It's just an old recipe." "Still," he continued, "it felt personal, like you poured more into it than just cooking." I looked back at the sink, my hands suddenly clumsy with the dishes. Why did that feel more intimate than a compliment should? The clock ticks on time moved strangely. The house felt both too big and too small. Daniel's absence pressed at the edges of the room, making every sound sharper. Every pause heavier. Mark didn't move to leave. Instead, he helped me dry the dishes, his hands brushing mine more than once. Whether accidental or not, I couldn't tell. When the last dish was put away, I expected him to finally say goodnight. But instead, he sat back down at the dining table, as though he wasn't ready to let the night end. "Do you ever get lonely here?" he asked suddenly. The question startled me. It wasn't casual, it was deliberate. I hesitated, then shook my head. "Not really. Daniel and we're fine." But the truth in my chest wasn't so simple. And somehow, I suspected Mark already. Knew that the unspoken layer. There was something in the way he lingered that night. Something unsaid that hung between us. It wasn't obvious, not yet, but it pulsed like a current beneath the surface. I told myself I was imagining it, that Mark was simply being polite, extending the night out of old friendship. But deep down, I knew better. His presence carried an intent, a reason he hadn't yet revealed. And though I didn't know it then, his decision to stay late after dinner would lead to words I could never forget. Words that would leave me frozen.